The Institute for Economic Justice has made submissions to the South African government for an emergency response package to mitigate the economic impact of COVID-19 on the country. Dr. Gilad Isaacs from IEJ joins me via Skype. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. So what amount do you believe would be a sufficient rescue package for South Africa, and what would that comprise of?
The amount spent must be commensurate with this extraordinary challenge which we have now. We're expecting a fall in GDP of at least between 6 and 8%. So that amounts to between 310 billion rand and 410 billion. There's been estimates which have placed that even higher. We've used that range and have put forward a costed package that has four main elements to it. The first is additional resources to ensure that our public health response is adequately resourced, whether that's protective gear, equipment, staffing, and so on. The second sphere is in income support. So that is an increase in distributions of funds to low-income households through social grants, through food parcels, and other means of ensuring income support. The third element is a guaranteeing of wage payments, which is agreed through the TERS scheme, but we've looked at that and feel that the funds allocated there, which is 30 billion rand, is insufficient and should be double that. The fourth area is in business support, in which that is both in non-funded items, which is loans or deferrals of various payments, which will be repaid later, and in actual bailout and grants, and that amounts to about 150 billion rand.
Mm-hmm. So you suggested that government issues social COVID-19 bonds, which the private sector would be required to buy. Also suggested a solidarity tax for those earning above R1 million, I think, among other fundraising measures. Are we not already constraining people who perhaps can't afford it despite a higher income?
I mean, we're in a moment of extraordinary need. Worldwide, the spending, we're looking at countries spending around 10% of their GDP, whereas like South Africa is at 0.1%. So there's no doubt that we need to find extraordinary ways of raising this revenue. It would not be a unmanageable burden to raise funds through a COVID bond. This would still guarantee an acceptable level of returns for the private and public sector, large institutional investors. And in taxation measures, all of those which raise about 59 billion are targeted at those earning above R1 million. Mm-hmm. And, you know, many earners in those categories have remained in employment and have been saving on their household expenses. There are also pools of existing funding, for instance, in the unemployment insurance fund, which need to be accessed.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to grants, you've suggested a once-off payment of 4,500 Rand to all adults in South Africa above the age of 18. Why?
So our grant payments have three elements. The first is a temporary increase of 500 Rand in existing grants. The second is a slight expansion of eligibility for those, for instance, including pregnant women in a child support grant. And the third is this universal basic income, which you are referring to. And essentially what we've seen is a plummet in the spending power of low-income households, and for that matter, for middle-income households also. And we need to both be able to sustain households, to ensure that people can feed themselves, clothe themselves, access basic needs, but we also need to ensure that spending can go and stimulate the businesses in South Africa. And our existing social grant distribution networks, whilst very extensive, still don't cover about 24 million people, either in direct payments or in indirect benefits. And so there's a large unserviced pool.
Okay. So where would the money to fund the initiatives that you've, as the IEJ, spoken about, come from? And what are the three current challenges, the biggest challenges there in making sure that there is adequate relief during COVID-19 for people living in South Africa?
Absolutely, thanks. So the five main funding streams which we've explored is short-term funding in borrowing, both in just in normal bond markets and through our Reserve Bank. Short-term borrowing has not increased in its cost for us, and that would cover the deferrals in tax payments, which we're putting forward as a business relief mechanism. As you said earlier, there's also been a proposal of a solidarity bond, which essentially is a government borrowing instrument, but at a reduced rate, which would both be voluntary and imposed on various institutional investors. The third is a solidarity taxation, which we've mentioned for those earning above R1 million. The fourth is utilizing of existing funds, like in the UIF. And the fifth is to think about the potential for accessing multilateral funds in international development banks, World Banks, or IMF. And there we would need to make sure that it is not coming with onerous conditionalities. In terms of the major challenges, the two major elements is ensuring that families, households, workers can actually manage to survive this period, and likewise ensuring that our business sector is maintained, is on lifeless support, so we don't emerge from this moment with widespread bankruptcies and an economy which is set back by many years.
Dr. Gilad Isaacs from the Institute of Economic Justice, thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon, giving us insight into some of the proposals that the IEJ has sent to government when it comes to economic relief during this period of COVID-19. It's time for a short